That's when we started to say, wow, this really is even more important than we first realized.
So the 49er fire is one of the most historic fires in Nevada County's history. They figured it changed the laws of the state of California that said this is how you have to protect your home. That came out of Nevada County.
Steve Eubanks came from the Fire Safe Council, and the main thing we needed to pay attention to was the ladder fuels. Planting has been removed from the edges of the house so that it does not touch the house. It was an incredible service from the Fire Safe Council to come out and spend a couple of hours going through this property.
So the ready phase is when there's no immediate threat to you and your family. This is the time when you should be doing education and planning, whether that be training, educating yourself, or accumulating equipment, hardening your home, creating defensible space.
Defensible space is really all about creating a buffer zone between your house and flammable vegetation. We really focus on defensible space around the home, that first 100 feet, but also around the roadway too. Another aspect of the ready phase is hardening the home, and really what that means is making your home more resilient to wildfire.
That's going to be putting the fine-grained mesh around the vents of your home so that embers won't get under your house or into the eaves of your house. That's going to be using non-combustible materials on your deck and around your home, so when an ember storm comes through, it's not going to ignite your home itself.
I currently live here in Grass Valley with my parents. All of us have sleep apnea, so we all have CPAP machines that require power in order to run.
I also use a nebulizer, and that's used to disperse medication that I need to get myself breathing again. When we have safety shutoffs, we have to hook up our equipment to batteries that have inverters.
We have a generator that powers some of the things around the house, but then I obtained a pretty substantial battery from Freed, and it was so easy to go through the process to obtain a battery that I would recommend it to anyone who might have medical needs that require power, or really anything. I would highly recommend contacting Freed.
So whether it's a snowstorm or a public safety power shutoff, we really want folks to be thinking about, okay, what are the things I'll need on hand to weather the storm? Do I need to have candles? Do I need to have battery-powered radio? Do I need to have flashlights? So what are the things that you'll need to shelter in place or address the disaster at hand?
So a go bag could be anything. It could be a backpack, it could be a suitcase. It's going to be something that you put together to sustain yourself, your family, your pets if needed. That's going to have food, water, medication, clothing, toiletries to get you by for 72 hours. You need to think of your go bag as the only resource you may have. Stores may be closed, the power may be out, so you may have to literally live out of this thing for a 3-day period as an evacuee.
If you are someone with a disability, maybe you have a chronic health condition. For me, I have type 1 diabetes, I have an insulin pump, right? And so that's a critical piece that I need to plan for if I'm gonna ever evacuate or be away from my house, frankly, for any amount of time, right? What we find often is that if people don't evacuate with their CPAP machine, with their oxygen concentrator, with their wheelchair, walker, then it can be difficult on the other end.
My name's Ulysses Palencia. I work in the 211 call center. I'm just a resident of Grass Valley. I have 2 daughters, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. In Nevada County, 211 is available 24/7. So what we provide for the community is information. That could be anything from directions to the resource centers. It can be letting them know where the fire is, you know, if they are themselves in an evacuation center, if it's a fire, if there's any information as to whether their power's coming back on during a PSPS. 211 gets the information that we provide directly from the county, so directly from the Office of Emergency Services. The whole team cares. We're all local community members. We all just want to help.
So we were all sleeping in bed on Thursday, November 8th in Paradise. And first the house phone rang. Picked up my phone. It was my sister who lived a block or so away from us.
We were woken by a telephone call from my daughter. She said that we were being evacuated.
I left sooner than them. I had everything ready. They were on the way out the door.
There was not time to think about what you're going to take, what you're not going to take.
The night before the fire, I knew it was a red flag warning, and I knew that it was a high risk. So on my way home, I filled up the tank.
On our way out, we didn't get too far from the house, and we're watching fire coming down the hill.
There was a machine shop right to my right there, and it had gas tanks and propane tanks. And I saw a lone ember kind of floating through, dancing through the air. And I watched it as it landed.
Okay, folks, we have our squash. We're able to be starting now. Commissioner McAteer, if you'll lead us in the pledge, please.
Happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jodina, if you'll call the roll, please.
Certainly, thank you. Commissioner Millman?
Here.
Commissioner Duncan?
Here.
Commissioner McAteer?
Here.
Commissioner Garst?
Here.
Chair Mastrodonato?
Here.
Thank you.
Tyler, any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
I have a change. I'd like to request the Higgins Fuel Station be pulled from the consent calendar.
That's a part of the consent item, so
Oh.
The chair should introduce that item and then you can pull it.
Okay, so we will then entertain a motion. Commissioner Millman, I'd suggest that you make a motion to accept the consent items and omit the item you'd like omitted.
Mr. Chair, in
Yeah.
the order of the agenda, there's public comment open to items that aren't on the agenda prior to the consent calendar.
Oh, gotcha. I forgot. Okay, that being said, let's do that. What we're going to do now is I'm going to open the public comment period for folks that are here that would like to address the Planning Commission on any items that are not on today's agenda. So if you have something that you would like to address the commission on that is not on today's agenda, you can come forward to the podium and do so now.
Diana Gamzon, I just want to thank you, Mike, for your service on this commission over many, many years.
You blew my cover. Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Okay. No more? Seeing none, hearing none, we will close the public comment period. Okay, moving on now to the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the items on the consent except for the Higgins Fuel Station extension of time.
Which is item number 5.
I'll second it.
The consent items are passed.
Take a vote.
Because we, oh, okay. Okay, so Jodina, if you'll call the roll, please.
How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Millman?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Mastrodonato?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Tyler, can you explain now what happens with that item?
Staff would look for direction from Commissioner Millman regarding the polling of the item and whether specific questions that Commissioner Millman might have. And then there's a representative from North State Grocery here to help address some of those questions.
Specifically addressing the reason for the extension of time, it has that there's unforeseen circumstances, largely challenges related to the COVID pandemic. It's my understanding that this has been approved since 2021. And the past couple of years, I don't know why there would have been an issue with construction drawings due to COVID for the last 2 years.
No, I agree. What happened was, my name is Michelle Leclerc. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for North State Grocery. And prior to June 23rd, I was the Chief Financial Officer of the company. And we have 1,000 employees, 21 grocery stores. And we're a little bit unique in that we're actually owned by the employees. It's a 100% employee-owned company. And in my duties today include all of the development projects of the company, all of the legal aspects of the company. I oversee all of HR. I oversee all of our real estate. I oversee all of our compliance. Prior to June 23rd, I had all those duties plus financial and accounting on top of it. And that worked out pretty good until COVID. And when COVID hit, it exposed me as being in over my head. The demands of COVID, the compliance demands on COVID, the turnover, our normal turnover in grocery is about 30%. It went to 75%. So my life has been difficult since COVID. And I had to prioritize different items. And this item was put on a back burner by me. And it kind of stayed back there for a while. Then other things happened. I got to deal with cancer, yay. We had to fire our architects because they were horrible. So we had to go out to bid for new architects for not just this project, but 2 other projects that we're working on. And before I knew it, 2 years was gone, and we needed an extension. So when I filled out the application, I thought to myself, well, what would be the overriding explanation here? And it really was COVID. We were clicking along pretty good as a company before that hit. And then on many, many different levels, it was like a bomb was tossed into our organization. And fortunately, we have a new CFO as of June 23rd, and I'm ready to get going on this project. So that is a longer version of what I kind of put in shorthand on the application.
And this is for a fuel station, right? It's at the corner of Higgins?
Yeah, it's not on the corner of Higgins. It's, have you seen the grocery store there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a gravel lot to the south of it, right there. So that would be the corner of Woodbridge and Higgins.
And with 2 other gas stations right there, you feel that you're ready to move ahead with this?
Well, there's a little gas station that's really difficult to get into on the, I believe that's the southwest corner of Combi and the highway. There's really no access off the highway. And then there's a Chevron that charges 20 to 30 cents a gallon more than we'll be charging next to the grocery store. So we think we'll do quite well. And one of the things we'll like to do, too, is it's going to enhance the grocery store. If you've ever shopped Holiday Market, you know that we have a rewards program, a loyalty program, and people can redeem their points for discounts on their groceries. And you can also redeem it for discounts on your gas. So even though we'll probably have the least expensive gas in the area already, you'll be able to make it even less expensive with your rewards points.
Thanks. I think those are my questions.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have a question.
Commissioner Duncan.
Excuse me, could you return to the podium, please? Do you have a timeline on when you might start the process and when you might think that that the project would be complete?
I know that we're starting immediately we've already engaged the architect, which is CSHQA out of Sacramento. They have experience in fuel as well as in grocery. In terms of construction, I don't know. I mean, the reason I say I don't know is it hasn't gone out to bid yet. We haven't been told by a contractor this is the timeline that it's going to take. But my goal would be to not have to come back here again and try to request another 2-year extension, only to be squashed. Sorry. I had to work in that pun after the spaghetti squash.
Got it.
But I can tell you this. We're ready to go. We're ready to start on the project, and we want to move it forward.
Good.
So.
There are many people in the community who are looking forward to that. And when it was first proposed, they were excited, and there was some chatter about it because it was viewed as a more affordable option. And there are many loyal holiday shoppers, as you probably are well aware, in that area.
Yeah. The store's doing great.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, and I'm sorry for your troubles.
No, really, it's all worked out great.
Yeah.
I've been blessed, and I'm not complaining at all.
Great.
So thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? No.
I'll move for adoption.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Jodina, if you'll call the vote, please.
Certainly, thank you. How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Millman?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Masterdonato?
Yes, the motion
Okay.
carries.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our one agenda item, which is a zoning.
Through the chair, you did remove that last item from the consent calendar and independently approve that, but you still would need to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
I thought we did.
Oh, you did. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
Yes? We're good? Okay. The next agenda item is a public hearing. This is a zoning ordinance amendment, and the project planner is Mr. Foss. Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, commissioners. With me is Matt Kelly, the Code and Cannabis Director, and together we'll be giving you an overview of the proposed amendments to the cannabis ordinance. This direction came from the Board of Supervisors at discussions at their workshops in 2023, and then restated at their workshop in 2024 in January of each year. And the board discussed a number of options for staff to look at as proposed amendments to the existing cannabis ordinance that was adopted in 2019. The main 5 points would be the allowance for a limited number of standalone retail dispensaries, separate from cultivation sites that do allow retail, storefront retail. This would be standalone in commercial zones, and I'll go through all these in more detail. Allow different cannabis activities or license types in industrial zones. Currently, cultivation and associated activities are only allowed in Ag, AE, and Forest, FR zones. Looking at creating a cannabis cultivation exclusion zone for communities or neighborhoods to opt into to exclude cannabis from their neighborhoods. Look at temporary cannabis events, kind of like a farmer market model, and the requirement to pay property taxes or for taxes to be current prior to the issuance of any cannabis-related activities or permitting. The board did appoint an ad hoc committee made up of two Board of Supervisors, and they have met with staff and reviewed the proposed ordinance and had provided direction throughout the process over the last year of development of the ordinance. I'll start going over with the proposed amendments to allow additional license types within M1 zoning. This is our industrial zoning. So the ordinance would allow indoor cultivation only, no outdoor cultivation, up to a maximum of 10,000 square feet. Would allow testing laboratories to test product for before it hits the retail market. I don't believe we have any testing laboratories within the county. There was one in Nevada City, however, that has since closed down to my knowledge. Would allow manufacturing, both volatile and non-volatile type of manufacturing in the M1 zone. Currently, manufacturing is allowed as part of a micro business, only non-volatile at a cultivation site. This would allow manufacturing to occur separate of cultivation. And then distribution activities, which is transporting product, packing, and storage of product between permitted businesses and cannabis license types. The zoning regulations do include a number of requirements to minimize impacts from these proposed uses, including odor control requirements, noise restrictions, compliance with our noise standards, standard setbacks from M1 zoning. There was, based on a number of comments received during the public comment review period, a standalone building requirement, which means that the cannabis-related activities would only be allowed within single buildings and not shared spaces, as to not impact neighboring businesses in condominium-type buildings, as well as parking requirements, standard parking requirements to ensure on-site parking. The next is the exclusion zone, and this takes the form of a combining district. The zoning ordinance has a number of combining districts that are attached to a zone district, such as our scenic corridor combining district, or planned development, or regional housing. This would be an additional combining district that is fairly straightforward, and would simply state that any property that has this combining district attached to it, so the base zone would remain the same, like an ag, an AE, or an FR, where cultivation is allowed. The CE, or cannabis exclusion zone, would prohibit commercial cannabis on that parcel. This would be a rezoning process that would go through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, like a normal rezone does, currently regulated by our code. It would be voluntary by property owners only. It would not be forced upon an unwilling property, as currently worded in the ordinance. And as with all other rezoning, the Board of Supervisors could also initiate a rezone, which could be against the property owner's will, but a property owner would not be forced into rezoning their property by a neighborhood association or a homeowners association or something like that. There would be a 5-year rollout period to remove the exclusion zone, similar to our TPZ, or Timber Production Zone, and our Williamson Act contracts. And this is intended to ensure that there's some certainty that a new property owner couldn't come in and just remove the zoning immediately. There's some rollout period that would have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, and then over time, after 5 years, that restriction could be removed and it would revert back to the base zoning. This is intended to limit future growth of cannabis operations in some neighborhoods. It's not, it would not be applied retroactively or to an existing cannabis operation that would put that business out of business. It would be done so that neighborhoods or like-minded neighbors could come together, place this zoning upon their own properties in a neighborhood. That would indicate to future buyers that this is not an area that is available for cannabis cultivation. Individual property owners that did not want to apply this zone district would be left out of that process, and that would be okay, but it would be potentially limiting the growth of future cannabis operations in that neighborhood. So that's the intent. It's not a magic answer to get rid of all of cannabis in a neighborhood, but it's a step toward a neighborhood identifying themselves as not being available for cannabis cultivation. The next item is temporary cannabis events, or kind of operate like farmers markets where cannabis product would be sold. The ordinance proposes that these would be allowed in commercial and industrial zones of C1, C2, M1, and BP, which is business park. but only within the rural centers of Soda Springs and North San Juan. And these are the same areas that the dispensaries would be allowed, and I'll show some maps in a moment. Similar to our outdoor event ordinance, they would be limited to 8 events or farmers markets per year in each of those areas. So Soda Springs could have 8 per year, North San Juan could have 8 per year, and they would be one-day event or one-day events between the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. These types of events are also regulated by the DCC, the Department of Cannabis Control, requiring permitting and a number of oversights. Our own standards would include parking, lighting, and noise controls. There is security required from the state and built into the proposed ordinance to ensure that people under 21 would not enter the area and no on-site consumption would be allowed. There are setbacks, a 600-foot setback in Soda Springs and a 500-foot setback from sensitive sites in North San Juan, and I'll discuss the reasoning for those distance requirements in a moment. Another 2 items would be that property taxes would be required to be paid prior to issuing permits. This is fairly simple language that's just been added to the cannabis ordinance. And then something that would apply to the retail sales at cultivation sites. That would not include the dispensaries that I'll be talking about in a moment, but would be that Nevada County grown product only are allowed for retail sales at cultivation sites. We have one storefront retail sale in the county, and that has a use permit that currently has this condition of approval that only Nevada County grown product can be sold. That was the intention of the ordinance originally, but was never codified, so we are adding some language to clarify that for cultivation sites, micro businesses with storefront retail, only Nevada County grown product is allowed. So the retail dispensaries, the ordinance proposes up to a maximum of 2 in the unincorporated area of the county. The ordinance also includes a competitive selection process that would be established by or selected through a committee that would be appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Matt will be going over that process in a couple of slides for more detail. In addition to the selection process, there would be a use permit requirement. So once an applicant was selected through the selection process, they would go through a use permit process, which would require a CEQA analysis, public hearings, and ultimately a decision before your planning commission. These locations would be limited to the M1, BP, C1, or C2 zoning in the rural centers of North San Juan and Soda Springs, a maximum of 1 dispensary in each area. And these would have similar setbacks as the farmers market of 600 feet in Soda Springs and 500 feet in North San Juan. This is a map of the Soda Springs area. Highway 80 is up top. This is Donner Pass Road, Old 40, right through. So this is the area just right off the highway or the freeway. The parcels that are outlined in white and crosshatched are the parcels that meet the criteria for both the events and a potential future dispensary. They have the proper zoning and the proper setbacks. 600 feet is kind of a default setback that is from the state, from youth-oriented facilities and schools. And so that setback is applied in this location, although there's not any sensitive sites that we know of in the area currently. This is the North San Juan area with Highway 49 going through the middle of this area. Again, the white outlined parcels are the eligible parcels that meet the criteria. And the reason that there's a 500-foot setback is that there is a church up in this location. There is no standard default setback from churches, but our current ordinance for cultivation activities and other cannabis-related activities do require a setback. The reason 600 feet was not chosen was because it would pretty much eliminate almost all of the parcels that are in this area. So given the 500-foot setback, kind of the demarcation of the Highway 49 felt that there was adequate separation for these parcels to be considered for cannabis-related events. This and or dispensaries. This little parcel up here is a PG&E substation, which would be very unlikely to be utilized. So most likely it would all be on the south side of Highway 49 if anything were to develop in that area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt to explain the competitive selection process.
Thanks, Brian. Members of the Planning Commission, Matt Kelly, Director of Code and Cannabis Compliance. So regarding the competitive selection process, there's a resolution, it's a draft that's included in your packet for your review and consideration and then recommendation to the board. It would establish a 7-member committee that would be appointed by the Board of Supervisors. 1 member from each district would be appointed with the addition of 2 members, 1 additional member from District 4 and 1 additional member from District 5 would also be included. The reason for the 7 members instead of 5 is because the dispensaries would be proposed to be located in North San Juan and Soda Springs, so to give those districts a little bit an extra additional vote. There was the reason for the added additional committee members. Members would need to be made up of a diverse and unique perspective, so including with a wide breadth of experience, including either experience in the cannabis industry, hospitality, design professionals, business professionals, local government licensing, social justice, drug reform, as well as familiarity with Nevada County. The application process would go through the Board of Supervisors and be appointed by them. It would make up a very similar process that we do for all of our commissions and committees now. And then more than likely, I would staff the commission or staff the committee, and then would receive support from the board office in regards to that. All meetings would be open to the public, and then the committee would meet on an as-needed basis, no less than once per year, and starting no sooner than next year in 2025. And what it would be is the committee would review 1 commercial dispensary application per year until we've received 2 applications and voted on and approved 2 locations. The committee would establish a merit-based approach to selecting the most qualified applicants. The committee would help to develop the application along with the scoring criteria, which I'll talk about in a second. And then after a committee or after an applicant was selected, they would then be invited to apply for a use permit, which would then go through the application and planning process, and then ultimately come to the Planning Commission for consideration. So a little bit about the application period and scoring review. So the committee would establish the process. Included in the resolution is some suggested scoring criteria, but these are suggestions to give the committee a basis to start. I'd really like the committee to establish the final selection and scoring criteria, and this would all be done through open committee meetings with the committee and opportunities for public comment as well. There would be once the committee application scoring criteria was developed and the application was completed, we would then open a 30-day competitive commercial dispensary application screening time. There would be a fee that would be established by the Board of Supervisors for this, and this is to cover staff time in reviewing the applications. It would just be a one-time application fee that the applicant would pay. Each application would be then scored and evaluated independently by committee members, and then there would be some staff recommendation as well, but ultimately the decision would be up to each individual committee member and the committee as a whole to make a recommendation and ultimately choose an applicant. Top applications based on the total points would be evaluated and scored. The applicant doesn't need to have a business location specifically determined. They just need to choose an area, be it North San Juan or Soda Springs. They would then move forward once selected. They'd have 12 months to apply for the use permit process to planning and go through that application process. They would develop site plans, architectural drawings, all the typical things for a use permit that would then come before the commission for consideration and ultimate approval or denial. And then it's starting in 2026 and then moving forward on a not less than a yearly basis. We would then do another application period until we had 2 commercial dispensaries. And then the committee wouldn't necessarily need to meet you would no longer meet unless a retail dispensary closed, and we would reopen that application period again. And then there would be an appeal right that's included in the proposed resolution. It would require a request for an administrative hearing, and what this would be is it would be an administrative hearing before one of our hearing officers. This would be very similar to an appeal for a code violation case or a cannabis violation case. It would not come to the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. Instead, it would just be with a hearing officer. So if there was a request for an appeal of the selected applicant, there is that right that members of the public would have. And then a little bit about the scoring criteria. So the committee would establish the final selection and scoring criteria, but generally included in the resolution is some outlines to give the committee some starting discussions. But a previous cannabis business retail experience or medical use dispensing or cannabis cultivation operation experience would be one of the scoring criteria. Ability to demonstrate quality of cannabis strains and an overall derivative of product offerings. This would be part of their application. So it would include the types of cannabis strains that they would carry, proposed products, proposed product labeling, things like that would be included as well. An overall employee training program, operating procedures, online ordering system. Most cannabis dispensaries do allow for online ordering as well as delivery as well. So this would be included in that. Their security program as well. So an overview of the dispensary's overall security program would be included as well. Hopefully a pre-existing Nevada County business with no outstanding code violations and in compliance with local and California state laws as well would also be a score criteria. Meeting the Nevada County design standards, so the Western and Eastern Nevada County design standards would also be included. We would hope to see some very basic architectural drawings if the applicant has them. They don't necessarily need to be put together by a registered professional, but if they have one, that could be looked at as well, or they could just be a simple architectural drawing that they put together, not necessarily put together by an engineer or an architect. And then additional information based on the applicant's demonstration to meet the DCC requirements as well as our county ordinance requirements and to operate in a safe and responsible manner in the county would also be looked at.
As part of the draft ordinance, the draft ordinance process, we did circulate the ordinance for public review for about 45 days between July 15th and August 30th. We received 34 comments, which are comment letters, which are in your packets. We did hold 4 public meetings with the Penn Valley Municipal Advisory Committee, the South County MAC, and special meetings in Soda Springs and in North San Juan. Originally, the ordinance did contain the allowance for up to 3 dispensaries in 4 locations, and the 2 additional locations were Penn Valley and South County. But based on feedback from those communities and discussions with our board ad hoc committee, we reduced the number of dispensaries to 2 and removed those 2 locations from consideration in the ordinance, remaining with just Soda Springs and North San Juan, as I presented earlier. And that was with ad hoc committee guidance, as well as trying to respond to the community's concerns from those areas. Just to wrap things up, the ordinance would be considered exempt from environmental review pursuant to a number of sections. Most of the amendments are similar to the existing allowed uses. They're already allowed either under the cannabis ordinance or such as in the M1 zone districts. They're very comparable with volatile and non-volatile type manufacturing to other allowed types of uses that are already permitted through or allowed to be permitted through our code, and that the original EIR does cover most of the potential impacts from the proposed amendments, in addition to the use permit requirement for dispensaries, which will require its own CEQA review and public notification process. I did want to make one amendment. This is regarding the locally grown or Nevada County grown products only. This is clarifying language that in the packet it basically is related to micro businesses, which is actually more restrictive and not quite the right way to limit that type of product. So the wording has been modified just so that it's part of non-storefront retail sales. And this wording matches the same restriction that is further in the ordinance for non-storefront retail sales. So just wanted to clarify that there is a minor clarification from the ordinance that's in your packet today. And with that, staff's recommendation, since this is ultimately going to the Board of Supervisors, is that your Planning Commission make a recommendation to the board to adopt the ordinance that would amend the zoning ordinance as described and add the cannabis exclusion zone, as well as adopting a resolution to approve the competitive application selection process and establishment of the application evaluation committee. And with that, Matt and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. This is a public hearing, so prior to us hearing from the public on this item, I will ask the commissioners if they have any quick questions for Brian or Matt before we move on to the public hearing portion. So that being said, we'll start with Commissioner Garst.
I want to start by disclosing that I sat on the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance board for about a year, but no longer sit on that board. Most of my questions have to do with the cannabis exclusion zone. Can you explain that process of what that application would look like? You said it was similar to rezoning. What would be included in that application requirements?
The application would be pretty brief, or would not require very much paperwork or plans. It's basically would just be a request fill out a basic application about what parcels would be included, demonstrating ownership, property owner acceptance or willingness, generally filed by the property owner. However, if there were a group of property owners, it would just be identifying which parcels are being proposed or being asked to be rezoned, showing the ownership information. We would probably create the map that would just show the combining district being attached for presentation purposes, and then it would go to the Planning Commission for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. I wouldn't anticipate any significant environmental review. It would likely be exempt because this is just a restriction of one very specific type of permitting requirement. I didn't mention, but personal use would still be allowed under state law, so up to 6 plants that would not apply. It would just be the commercial cannabis cultivation that's covered by our ordinance. So pretty straightforward, easy application. There is a cost to it. It could be up to about $5,000, but we would be open to processing these in groups. So if a neighborhood or a group of 20 parcel owners were to get together, and we could do all those in kind of one process through the board and the Planning Commission to reduce cost to individual property owners. So hopefully that answers your question.
So the other combining districts that exist in the county, how were those established? Are those, I assume, required consensus among the properties that?
They were established through just the development of the code and the need to identify other type of specialties, like the scenic corridor was applied because it was along an identified scenic corridor. So that was not necessarily a voluntary property owner decision. We have an avalanche hazard combining district that is just based on where the geography and things indicate that there might be a potential for avalanche. So it's kind of just a warning type of a zoning. Our planned development overlay zones are somewhat mixed. Some of those were requested by property owners when we went through the general plan update and the new zoning ordinance in the year 2000 and the late 90s. So it's kind of a mix of depending on what the other combining districts are for. We do have a regional housing needs combining districts. That's to identify affordable housing sites, and those were placed on the properties with willing property owner through our housing element process about almost 10 years ago now.
One of the public comments that was received was from Lisa McCandless, the city planner at the city of Nevada City, stating concerns around the exclusion district potentially being discriminatory in nature. Can you speak to that concern?
Yeah, other than I don't agree or see any validity to that comment. I don't know how that would be discriminatory if it's a voluntary application of the rezone, and other zoning districts don't allow cultivation, so I don't see any validity to that comment.
That's all I have for staff at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner McAteer.
Okay. So, the two public hearings that you had, the two public hearings you had in North San Juan and up on the summit, they well attended? I'm just trying to understand how many people were at these.
I wouldn't say they were well attended. In North San Juan, we had 2 people.
Oh.
And then I was not at Soda Springs. Matt was at the Soda Springs one.
Commissioner McAteer, I think we had 2 or 3 people for Soda Springs as well.
Okay, because I know they have a homeowners association up there on Donner Summit, where they were obviously notified, all the people.
They were.
In
The
that
Donner
area.
Summit Association was notified, and we had
Okay.
a meeting sort of through them.
Great, thank you. Can you discuss this Nevada County only? I'm a little fuzzy on this because I know that the 2 dispensaries in Grass Valley and Nevada City sell things other than Nevada County grown products. So who does this apply to? So just help me out on this.
It would apply to the cultivation sites and any business that had a micro business for a storefront retail or non-storefront retail, actually. So it wouldn't apply to the dispensaries that we're proposing today, so those could operate like the 2 existing dispensaries in the county. However, like the 1 storefront retail that we have that the Planning Commission approved a use permit
Down in Smartsville.
Right.
Uh-huh.
That had a condition of approval that it's only Nevada County grown
Okay.
local product. And that is something that I believe the Cannabis Alliance was supportive of. It's intended to just try to support our local farmers.
So therefore, outside of the Smartsville one, and everything else is exempted because they're dispensaries, what else, who else would this apply to if we added more agricultural, farm stands?
Yeah, any future use permits or micro businesses that had storefront or non-storefront retail sales would apply, and it would be limited to just locally grown or manufactured product.
Okay, because I made this feel like this was some big thing, and I can see it's not. Okay, my next question goes to the cost of rezoning for these people who live in, Lake of the Pine or LOP ranchos. Incurred?
That's our standard rezone cost. That's in our fee schedule that's adopted by the board. It's just based on the number of hours for staff time to process the application through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Because my first initial read of this was going to be, oh my God, we're going to have 150 of these coming to us and standing here and listening to, every, Ted, Carol, and Alice and whatever else telling me that why they need to exclude this. And now I'm getting the fact that really very few will be coming because the cost will be prohibitive for many.
It could be. It is costly. I would anticipate, groups of homeowners, property owners getting together and doing it as a neighborhood or along a street or a certain area. That would be a potential way to reduce cost and to do them, bigger numbers, larger groups at one time.
Yeah. And finally, I'd like to talk about the youth exclusion. So we're going to have this farmer's market up in North San Juan. The school superintendent in me comes out at times. So obviously, high school kids would love to run up there and see what's going on. How does the county plan to deal with this and enforce the age 21 limit?
Well, The state permitting requires security, so there would be a plan to control the space where people would access and be limited for age restrictions, similar to any other establishment that has an age restriction, local bars, those types of things. It would be incumbent on the permit holder to ensure that the security is enforced, and I'm sure there would be penalties or fines if there were underage people accessing the site or partaking in on-site consumption. And then probably working with our code compliance or cannabis compliance division, they may, and I haven't talked to Matt about this, but they may be doing inspections or just doing spot checks on these type of events to ensure that they're complying with.
Because there's not an ABC of cannabis.
Well, there's a DCC, so it's not an ABC, but it's a DCC.
And that's a state agency that
Correct.
checks ages?
Commissioner McAteer, yeah. So the Department of Cannabis Control, or DCC, is the state agency that regulates commercial cannabis in California. My staff, I would imagine we would be doing inspections for these. This would require a permit through planning, and we would also probably issue an ACP or an annual cannabis permit that would go with this. We would then probably help to inspect it prior to its operation and making sure that they meet all the DCC requirements as part of their application.
Good. Well, I look forward to Diana addressing some of that for me, if she doesn't mind, when we get to that kind of questioning. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Duncan.
For the record, I would disclose that I did have a phone conversation with Diana Gamzon from the Cannabis Alliance prior to this hearing today. I have a question, Matt, about the dispensaries. So once a dispensary permit is issued, do they have it for life? Will there be some type of review, after 10, 20 years to open it up?
So, and I would defer some of this to Brian as well. So the dispensaries would require a use permit, and it would operate with conditions of approval. Similar to a project that requires a use permit. That use would run with the land so long as the use is maintained. It's a discretionary permit. What would also come with that is an annual cannabis permit. And so similarly to how we inspect cannabis farms now, my staff inspects those twice a year. So we would also inspect these twice a year as well, making sure that they meet meeting their DCC requirements, along with making sure that they meet their conditions of approval as well.
And that they're maintained in a fashion that is well represents the business.
Yes.
Okay. That was a question. There was, in the comment letters, there was a person who said that they were a cannabis inspector. So would they be required to go in and conduct any of these reviews for a dispensary?
Commissioner Duncan, I would need to review that comment again, but the DCC does have a compliance division that we do work with, and they can inspect cannabis farms. They also could inspect retail dispensaries, micro-businesses, volatile manufacturing facilities. They do, and there also is the Water Board also has an inspection division as well, and so I don't know if for a dispensary would need Water Board permitting, but if they do, or if the Water Board was involved, then they would also inspect it. But the Department of Cannabis Control would annually inspect it as well as part of their compliance process.
Okay. Also, as far as the exclusion zones, theoretically, you could create a zone if several property owners went together, but there was someone who didn't want to join in. So that would create a donut of sorts with that, and that's perfectly legal to go forward?
Yeah, there would not be any type of, concurrent properties or any type of restriction. So it could be a little bit checkerboard or, a donut hole around a property. Again, it's not the perfect solution, but it's a tool that neighborhoods could utilize just to indicate, that area is not available for cannabis cultivation, and it would potentially help reduce the spread or introducing new cultivators into the area. So that's the idea behind it.
Last question. It was interesting. I think this is the first time we've said that discretionary applicants have to be current on their property taxes. And I mean, I don't think there's any other requirement in the county for other discretionary
You are correct.
requests. So
Yes.
would this apply to the people requesting exclusionary zones?
That's a good question.
I mean,
I don't believe
property
it
taxes
would.
are what help, operate the county. And
Right.
I do believe in people paying their fair share and should not be given a pass.
You're right, it doesn't apply to other types of permits, or not something we look at. Thinking it through, I don't think it would apply to rezone applicants because it's for cannabis-related, and that's kind of the inverse of cannabis-related type of an applicant. So unless the commission wanted to make that recommendation, that applied. I think as currently written, it would not apply to a rezone applicant.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that? Why is that provision in there? I didn't understand it.
That was a discussion from the Board of Supervisors, and just a concern that there were some farms and cultivators that were not current with their taxes in the past, and so thought that that would be something that we should put in the ordinance. So it was kind of based on direction and discussion from the board. It's not obviously final, but that's where it generated from.
And one other question, sorry, is this exclusion zone, did this come out of thin air, or is this happening in, Sonoma County or Placer or wherever?
I believe Humboldt or Mendocino has a version of this that is applied. I think they took a different tact. I don't know that it's voluntary. I think the county selected areas that would be excluded for cultivation-related activities. Nevada County did that in a way, just with identifying certain zoning districts and certain parcel sizes. So in a way, we did identify eligible type of properties. So again, this wasn't the perfect solution or a heavy-handed solution. It was meant to just be another tool for property owners to use currently, because they also have CC&Rs that could effectively do something similar, but this would be something a little more permanent.
Thank you.
Anything more, Commissioner Duncan?
That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Millman?
Thank you. Okay, so going through this, we're allowing a maximum of 2 retail dispensaries. We currently have 0 in the county area, right? And 2 in each of the cities? Or there's 1 in Truckee as well?
I don't believe there's 1 in Truckee. There's 1 in Nevada City, 1 in Grass Valley, and none in the unincorporated area, other than the storefront retail from the one down near at the end, or off Highway 20 towards Smartsville.
And that's the storefront retail that's connected to the actual cultivation, not a separate store?
Yes, correct.
So on the one hand, the county is now allowing a standalone storefront dispensary to be in the county area. That's part of the intent of this.
Yes, correct. 1 in Soda Springs, 1 in North San Juan.
And nowhere else you can't have a dispensary anywhere else in the county.
That's correct, as currently written.
So then, currently, you can cultivate based on a variety of other rules that were primarily in ag or, I think, forest or something. And so now we're adding industrial to that.
Correct. There would be up to 10,000 square feet of indoor cultivation in industrial zones, in addition to the other activities, manufacturing, transport, and testing laboratories.
So then, an exclusion zone, if somebody owns a piece of property and now, is this only about the industrial, or this is also about the ag property?
It would really only apply to the ag FR AE property for cultivation sites. I guess technically it could go on an M1 property, but it was more designed for the residential neighborhoods.
So if somebody owns a property and they don't want cultivation on it, why do they need an exclusion zone to say, I'm not going to cultivate on it, or I'm not going to allow my tenants to cultivate on it?
They don't necessarily need it. It's something that would be in place and in place for up to 5 years, so that it would, again, be an indicator that that neighborhood, those properties are not available in the future for cannabis cultivation, and it would potentially prevent the spread of new cultivators coming into that area, and give some assurance to a neighbor that that property would not be cultivated when it changed hands.
For 5 years?
For at least 5 years.
That one seems odd to me. Okay. So then the next thing is to allow kind of farmers markets. And the farmers markets are only allowed in the industrial or commercial zones in those two communities that we talked about, the white rimmed.
Right. Correct.
So then going back to basically the farm stands, correct? The farm stands can only sell Nevada County grown, and the farmers market can only sell Nevada County grown as well?
The farm stand, the farmers market, I don't think that potentially would apply. I'd have to double check. I don't remember if we put that standard in there or not. No. I don't know that it's specifically restricted to Nevada County only on the farmers markets currently.
So the dispensaries are, we've already said, set aside from that. They can sell weed from wherever. The retail at the point of cultivation, they're limited. And so then you're going to check the farm. Okay, I think I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So real quick for me, so like everyone, my questions are directed at this exclusion zone. So just to kind of clarify for me, if not more folks, the county has identified parcels or properties that can opt in to be excluded. Is that kind of summing it up?
We haven't identified any properties. It's a tool that would be available to any property that would potentially otherwise allow cannabis cultivation through the code. So any AG, agriculture, AE, or forest property would potentially be eligible to apply this exclusion zone to. It wouldn't be necessary in other zones because cultivation is not allowed in those other zone districts.
I misunderstood. I thought you had mentioned that the county had identified the parcels that were eligible for the exclusion zones, but that's not the case.
No, we've identified properties that are eligible for the dispensaries and the market temporary events.
Gotcha. So going back to these exclusion zones, these these owners have the ability to either opt out or opt in, so to speak, and it's a 5-year minimum program.
Right.
And then, I don't know if we discussed this, what happens after the 5 years?
It would just revert back to the underlying zoning. So if it was ag CE and the CE or cannabis exclusion zone were to be removed, it would just go back to ag.
And there wouldn't be another opportunity to opt out or to be excluded?
Yeah, I mean, someone could
They'd have
rezone
to
it back.
reapply, do it all over again. Right. Okay, so that being said, just as an example, do we have these zones in place anywhere in the county now for any particular reason?
Well, we have a number of combining districts in the county.
Right.
Scenic corridor, PD. We don't have any exclusion zones because it doesn't exist.
So there's no opportunity for folks to apply for exclusion coverage for anywhere else in the county for anything. So if churches or fast food. I don't know. I'm just curious because this is kind of a new one for us. But no. Great. Okay.
The exclusion zones is it might be a sales tool that people might use for their property when they're prospective people looking to purchase land in Nevada County, and they would say, well, we're in an exclusion zone, 5 years, but you can apply again. That limits what your neighbors can do in terms of cannabis production, except for the personal use that they can grow. So no commercial operations would be allowed.
And obviously this is a newly bred living and breathing thing that we're constantly adjusting to. So I think my questions were more so to the fact that it was something that I am unfamiliar with.
I have another question. Oh, sorry.
Understanding. No.
I have another question about the exclusion zone. If the process is the same as a rezone, why not just have people who want to be excluded rezone to a zoning district that doesn't allow cannabis?
That would be a much more difficult threshold to meet because we're not going to rezone a piece of property that's 20 acres in the rural area to an R1 or some other zone district. So the base zoning stays the same. So you lose different allowed uses when you change your zone district. This combining district would not affect any of the base zoning allowances or other restrictions. It would just be focused simply to cannabis, and it would be a very low threshold to be able to recommend approval. Going from one base zone district to another zone district requires much more justification. It could be possible in some areas, but it wouldn't be worth what the benefits of just applying the exclusion zone would provide.
So if somebody buys a property that was previously zoned as an exclusion zone and wants to remove that, it's the burden of the new owner to apply for the removal of that zoning designation?
Correct.
And then that would take 5 years to go away.
If the board were to approve it, then 5 years from that date, it would be removed and would revert back to the base zoning.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's time that this is a public hearing, so we will hear from the public on this particular item. And just to kind of set what's going to happen here, I'm going to open up the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on this issue, they can approach the podium. Please give us your name and address. If you're an individual speaking on this item, we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. If you're representing an organization, by all means, we can allow you 5 minutes. Just make sure that you identify yourself as that. So that being said, I will now open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, please approach the podium. Give us your name and address, please.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. My name is Tracy Sheehan, and I am the Policy Director at the South Yuba River Citizens League, also known as CIRCLE. We're also known as the Yuba River Waterkeeper. I'm here today to provide comments on one of the 6 proposed amendments, that being the proposed exclusion zone combining district. Founded in 1983, CIRCLE is one of the nation's largest organizations focused on a single watershed, the Yuba. We are dedicated to landscape-level conservation and restoration, climate change resilience, and community engagement. CIRCLE has been engaging on cannabis issues since 2013, when we initiated the Growing Green for the Yuba program. Through Growing Green, we aim to educate the community about the value of the permitting and legalization process and encourage watershed-friendly cannabis cultivation practices in the Yuba watershed. Unregulated and illegal cannabis cultivation poses major environmental concerns in the Yuba watershed. It can create water quality concerns such as sedimentation, pesticide pollution, nutrient runoff, and increased harmful bacteria, all of which are present in our watershed, in addition to trespass grows and illegal water diversions. As part of the Growing Green campaign, CIRCLE actively engaged in the county's public process to legalize commercial cannabis cultivation. When Nevada County's commercial cannabis ordinance was adopted in 2019, CIRCLE evaluated the environmental effects of legal commercial cannabis cultivation on both our community and the Yuba River watershed. Key to the success of the ordinance is having illegal growers enter the legal and regulated market by minimizing barriers to that entry. In 2021, CIRCLE surveyed the community and discovered that many cultivators believed that the process of coming into compliance was inaccessible, too expensive or time-consuming, and lacking in benefits. Despite this, and even though cultivators face significant regulatory hurdles, over 200 cultivators have applied for licenses since the county program began. CIRCLE is concerned about a proposal to create an exclusion zone combining district that would allow residents to apply to prohibit all commercial cannabis activities to preserve the residential nature of the property. CIRCLE believes the exclusion zone amendment is redundant because under our current ordinance, cannabis is only allowed to be farmed on land zoned agriculture. Cultivation is not permitted in areas zoned residential agriculture or residential. Notably, the primary use of agriculture and timber production zone land is for commercial agriculture use, with all other uses secondary. We should remember that a wide variety of commercial activities occur on agriculture zone lands in Nevada County, including timber harvesting, cattle ranching, horse boarding, commercial vegetable farms, and vineyards and winery production. The amendment's selective exclusion undermines the principles of equitable land use management and sets a concerning precedent for potential future restrictions. Moreover, CIRCLE is concerned that this amendment could provide a disincentive for legal compliance among cannabis cultivators by creating additional perceived barriers or uncertainties. It discourages growers from transitioning to the legal market, which is essential for effective regulation and environmental protection. Circle recognizes that the amendment is intended to preserve the residential nature of the property. We point out that the county ordinances have specific language about rezoning lands and a clear pathway to achieve a change of zoning. The county has a process to consider rezoning applications based on
My apologies, it's been more than 5 minutes. Would you?
Has it been?
It has.
I thought we were going down to 1 minute. So we'll let you finish up in a few seconds here. Go ahead. Yes. Real quick.
There it goes. Okay. Since land zone residential ag do not allow commercial cannabis farming, it would make sense to utilize this established and transparent rezoning pathway and remove the exclusion zone amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tracy.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. My name is Maggie Phillipsborn. I own property and live on Owl Creek Road in District 4. I'm the head of the Jones Bar Firewise community, which spans over 200 parcels. Some are BLM, some are state parks, many homes, and some are small local commercial businesses, including 2 vineyards, one that is open to the public some days of the week, and 4 licensed cannabis farms. In 2020, when the Jones fire devastated part of our community, it was noted afterwards by fire personnel that the fire requirements, things like clearing, water storage, and hookups, turnaround space, etc., required by one of the cannabis farms was one of the saving graces for immediate neighbors and played a critical role in the fire not being worse than it was overall. Supporting small businesses like cannabis farms that actively engage in fire-safe land stewardship like this is a positive both for our neighborhoods and the entire county. I also have been intimately following cannabis industry and local policy for the past 6+ years. And I want to remind us all, Nevada City is a really wonderful example, especially for issuing permitting for various types of cannabis businesses like what's being proposed today in light industrial zoning. These cannabis businesses are an essential part of the local industry. They provide support to local farmers who are farming on ag-zoned land. These are the distributors, manufacturers, testing lab, that portion of what's being proposed today. The proposal before you specifies industrial M1 zoning for these types of businesses, specifically having to be standalone buildings. Regardless of the type of building, wouldn't the logical solution be for individual property owners to decide if they want to lease to a cannabis business or not? That maintains private property rights. It helps really squash the elephant in the room of destigmatizing cannabis and giving the local industry an opportunity to be successful. Let's be honest, there are very few, probably less than 5, standalone buildings in M1 zoning in unincorporated area. That means, like, without the terminology itself, this is sort of banning those businesses from being able to operate. Nevada City, again, has a really wonderful example. They use multi-tenant buildings. They've been doing this for many, many years without any incidents. If a property owner doesn't want to rent to a cannabis tenant, they simply don't do that. All to say, the cannabis industry is actually a fiscally very important part of our county, and it's really struggling statewide. Part of that is because of the lack of a functioning supply chain statewide, a bottleneck from the lack of retail outlets and opportunities for farmers and manufacturers to innovate and get quality products to those who want them. Supporting these opportunities.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Jones from District 4. My husband Brian and I have lived on the ridge for 35 years. We built our own home, raised 2 successful children. Now we raise miniature donkeys and have a cannabis farm, Fudu Farm. Fudu is a family word that means putting your best into whatever you do, and we do our best. Besides farming, Brian is a general contractor, and I work producing events at the San Juan Ridge Community Library. You can ask me about my next event later. It's super fun. We also own a production company, Voodoo Productions, that produces Ridgestock Music and Sustainability Expo on the Ridge. We are regular volunteers for Circle, many of their events. I love producing events that bring our community together and pull everybody out of their homes. I'd like to be part of creating cannabis events that bring awareness to our community and allow farmers to celebrate and share their hard work. As a river ambassador for Circle, I speak to hundreds of people on the weekend. I am well aware that most river visitors are from out of the area and do not spend tourist dollars in our community. Cannabis events in appropriate venues on the Ridge will provide economic development opportunities not only for farmers, but existing businesses like the gas station, the restaurants, whatever, mercantile. Events such as this will attract the tourists to stop and participate in this opportunity and learn the history of the area, as well as contribute to our economy. The Activities and Improvement Center in North San Juan, or the Community Center, is a great location for such events. It's zoned appropriately, is already designed for classes, farmers markets, and festivals. I ask that you recommend to the Board of Supervisors to add this location for zoning events. Lastly, have any of you been to the Mandarin Festival in Auburn? The Mandarin milkshakes are fantastic. All the farmers get to show up all their Mandarin stuff that they took care of over the year, and all the community gets to come out and appreciate what they enjoy. Cannabis farmers are just like that. We love what we do, we work hard, and we are proud of our results. We want to celebrate our work with our community and other farmers. Please consider events in our community.
Thank you, Barbara.
Since we're on events, I will go next. Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Patricia Rockwell. I live in District 4 and have been a proud member of the Penn Valley MAC for 3 years. My 3 children and I co-own Green Gift Gardens, which is a small 10,000 square foot cannabis farm. Nearly 28% of all organically grown cannabis in the state of California is located in Nevada County, and we are proud to be one of those OCal certified farms. Nevada County has a rich history of organic farming and is so rewarding to carry on the tradition. As a small craft farm, we face many challenges and continue to look for ways to expand our market and streamline the ways we can do business. One of the ways we can do so is to interact directly with our consumers. At this point, Green Gift can only sell directly to distributors who then will take our product to retail customers. We are excited by the potential impact of our farm being able to interact directly with our customers. We have participated in the Hall of Flowers in Sonoma County a couple of years and saw a notable impact on our sales as a result of talking directly to people. We would like to have that same opportunity here in Nevada County where we live. For example, as to what Barbara was speaking to, it'd be so cool to host a cannabis medical summit on the Ridge, which is our county's hub for legacy cannabis expertise. We could have local speakers on medicinal qualities of cannabis, seminars, and have local cannabis sold. An ideal location for an event like this would be the community center on the Ridge. However, it is zoned Res Ag and thus restricted according to our ordinance, to my understanding. My ask is for the community center to be in an allowable parcel for cannabis events. I'd like to share some successful cannabis events that are hosted in other counties. Mendocino has used cannabis events as a fundraiser to benefit organizations like the Mendocino Land Trust and Cancer Resource Center of Mendocino, where cannabis was auctioned off and sold. In Sonoma County, the Emerald Cup is held, where the Emerald Cup is held, is an educational conference and a cannabis competition. We could have our own Nevada County Cup here on the Ridge. Events like this would bring a lot of economic development to our area. In good faith, Green Gift, along with other small craft farms, have done the necessary due diligence to become legal farms. We are here today to support the language that allows the ability to host cannabis events, which will be another tool to put in our toolbox as we navigate the road to success. Today, I am requesting that, that we be able to succeed as farmers, that we need the opportunities that are given to all farmers of all kinds of products. Today, I'm requesting that you consider opening the pathway for our farms to participate in events such as the example above. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Patricia.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Ring. I live on Johnston Drive, unincorporated Grass Valley area. I want to say thank you for everybody here, including staff and the council, for reviewing this issue. I think it's important, and I think that other counties would do best to do something similar to review this issue and truly understand it from all facets. I attended the ERC Economics Summit just a couple weeks ago. We had a UC Berkeley professor of economics tell us that we should embrace cannabis as a county. It is an agricultural product that we should do something similar to France, where we have a boutique product related to specific areas in the area that will say this is a product specifically from here, and you can guarantee its quality because of where it's from. I've grown up here. I've lived here a long time. I own a house here. I think that whether this is a legal process or not, we need to understand that cannabis is a very prevalent product that comes out of our county. And I commend anybody that tries to go from the black market to the legal process to get it done. It is expensive, and with that in mind, I would also recommend reducing entries to barrier entries into this field. And to me, when I hear, regardless of what industry you're in, you don't have to pay your taxes or get your taxes current to get a permit. But if you're in the cannabis business, you do. That seems a little discriminatory. And I think that everybody deserves a fair shake. And if you're willing to go legal in this process where the black market, quite frankly, flourishes, I think there should be a reduction in barriers to try and facilitate that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
Hello, my name's Holly Lusk. I live over on Auburn Road in an unincorporated area of Grass Valley. I've lived here in Nevada County since 1979. I raised 2 children in this county, and I have 6 grandchildren whom are being raised in this county. I'm a property owner, and I was in the title industry business for 25 years. Cannabis has long been a subject for lively discussion, both pro and con, but I'm not here to debate that issue. The voters determined that issue some time ago, and it is legal and allowable to both consume and grow by law, but only if you confine yourselves to the legal restrictions. Our legal cannabis farmers have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars maintaining that to conform to these laws, which has resulted in considerable review for our county. This includes growing on commercially ag zone property only. This is exactly what the zoning is meant for, farming. The primary goal of ag land zoning is to preserve agricultural land and prevent incompatible land uses that may hinder agriculture. To exclude a specific type of farming is discriminatory, a road which our country has been down before. For example, it was common in the early 20th century to exclude buyers of certain races or religions from purchasing in specific areas. As we all know, those exclusionary deeds were thrown out by the Supreme Court. There is another solution for those who wish to confine cannabis farming by petitioning to have property rezoned to residential agriculture where it already is not allowed. I don't think anyone disagrees that this county needs revenue, and the cannabis industry is providing this. It is simply unfair to place an exclusion zone for cannabis in ag-zoned land where other commercial activity is allowed, including other types of farming or commercial livestock. I would respectfully request the commissioners to remove the provision for cannabis exclusion zones in their recommendation that goes to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners and county staff. My name is Abraham Valinsky. I'm from District 4, and I'm proudly one of the first legal farms in the county. Me and my wife own and operate a 15,000 square feet certified organic cannabis farm. We raise our 3 children on the land, and we also farm fruit trees. I'm also a vice president of the Wolf Mountain Road Association. I'll be speaking today about the proposed ordinance about property tax and exclusion zones. The proposed ordinance states that all property tax must be paid in current before all permits are issued to any cannabis business. This policy is discriminatory as it will apply only for cannabis businesses and not to other business sectors. I see this as bad policy. Why is cannabis industry treated differently? Equality for all business should be the policy from the county's perspective. I'm not supportive of an exclusion zone either, just for cannabis. In my neighborhood, we have vineyards and horse boarding. Each of these businesses has people that come to the farm, pick up the harvest, or staff the farms. Our zonings allows for commercial businesses. Cannabis is no different. In fact, farms are micro farms compared to the other ag operations. Cannabis should not be excluded as ag operations. A ag product is ag zone land which is intended for commercial farming activities. If neighbors do not like commercial activity, they should petition and rezone. I urge this commission not to support requiring property taxes on cannabis permits and not to support the cannabis exclusion zones. We need to treat the cannabis industry like any other farming business in the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is David Cooper, District 4. Me and my brother own and operate Hillcraft Farms, which is a small family farm in District 4. We have been part of the first wave of legal farms in our county. I'm a proud father of 4 boys and an active member in this community, and take pride in sponsoring local nonprofit events such as the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. As we move further down the path of being legitimate, recognized business that brings value to our community, we expect to be treated the same as any other business here in Nevada County. The path to compliance hasn't been easy, and the fight to continue doing what we love, which is farming, is constant. We face many obstacles at a state level as well as federally, yet we continue to find a way forward. We are part of the movement that is building something unique in Nevada County. It's an industry of craft cannabis farmers that farm the land respectfully and organically, and we're continuing the legacy of cannabis growing that has been a part of this culture for almost 6 decades. I stand before you today to ask for equal opportunity as every other business here, and to be treated with the same respect when considering regulations. I'm speaking directly to the proposed requirement for land tax. Sorry, I messed it up. I'm speaking to the proposed requirement to pay our land tax before issuing or reissuing cannabis-related permits. Yet no other farm or business in our county has been held to this. We are running a business just like any other business and expect to adhere to the same standards and not to be singled out. This is not an exception, and we ask that we be treated the same way as the industries in this county. While the majority of us cannabis farmers' property taxes are up to date, I must speak out about this just because of principle, that we cannot be the only ones that are singled out in this county for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is John Foley. I own Riverstar Ranch, a licensed and certified organic cannabis farm here in the county, and I also serve as the board chair of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. I grew up in Nevada County, went to grade school and high school here. My wife and I continue to raise our children here. We live a rural lifestyle where we grow gardens, orchards, raise chickens and beef cattle along with cannabis. My wife volunteers her time at Clear Creek School where our children go, and I have volunteered countless hours advocating on behalf of myself and fellow farmers with the Cannabis Alliance to advance common sense policy to have a functioning and regulated cannabis program here. I'm not alone in my story. Obviously, many of my other licensed farmers here in the county are operating in the exact same fashion as myself, raising their families, running a legitimate business, and being a productive member of their community. I say this today because I was concerned and disappointed by some of the language used in the written public comment on the proposed ordinance amendments, calling those in the cannabis industry undesirables and druggies. And those voices would like to go as far as creating an exclusion zone to remove those types from their presence. Now, the First Amendment certainly entitles people to have those opinions, and I support that. But its other function is to challenge those opinions with stronger ideas and arguments. Clearly, these terms used during written public comment do not accurately describe our licensed cannabis farmers here. And I would argue instead that personal biases and existing stigmas toward cannabis are alive and well. And again, I respect that. Decades of prohibition do not wash away those views overnight. However, we are not only talking about personal opinions and biases, we are talking about those things by shaping public policy and that will have lasting effects on our community. I believe that is where we must draw a line as a community and instead shape public policy from fact. The fact of the matter is, since 2019, over 180 new businesses have started in Nevada County, providing economic opportunity and growth. And while it hasn't been perfect, as no other new industry is, it has by all accounts been a success. Contrary to the opposition's beliefs, out of those 180 new businesses, there have been just a small handful of neighbor-to-neighbor issues. So I ask today that we put personal biases aside and instead use common sense to support the very reasonable amendments presented today, affording our farmers the tools necessary to continue their entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Good afternoon. I'm Elise Timony Jackson, born and raised resident in Ugrad of 98. And I'm the co-founder and business director of Sierra Kind, a licensed 10,000 square foot cannabis grow in South County. In addition to sitting on the board of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, I'm a member of the Farm Bureau, and I also sit on the board of the Nevada County Jewish Community Center, chairing the Social Action Committee. In the past 5 years, I've organized a community blood drive, as well as hosted specific drives for the Interfaith Food Ministry, the Nevada County Food Bank, the Diaper Project, the Cinderella Project, and most recently CASA, which is an organization for local foster youth. My children attend the local schools, and my daughter just showed a lamb at fair through FFA. My husband, who I met at Magnolia last century, and I run our small farm with my father, and our one part-time employee is my husband's long-term growing partner and also a local high school grad. As a cannabis farmer, I am here to support cannabis events in both North San Juan and Soda Springs. The number of events allowed should align with current county regulations regarding special events, which is capped at 8 events per property per year. There's no reason to fix what is not broken. Over the past few years, we have all witnessed the contraction of our local businesses, and while Mill and Broad Street are rebounding, these outlying regions desperately need economic development. Cannabis events in North San Juan will stimulate tourism, and not just on the Ridge. They will have a trickle-down effect for the rest of the county, local hotels, eating out, or even simply buying gas at the Sierra stop. The Ridge has been a cannabis hub for decades, stretching back at least 50 years. And we have the opportunity to allow North San Juan to take its rightful place as a famous and California historical cannabis destination. Cannabis events could include anything from medical and or sustainable cultivation conferences with local speakers, fundraisers, movie screenings, or even a cannabis farmers market. As per state guidelines, no alcohol would be served, no one under 21 would be allowed, and it would allow us legal farmers another outlet to reach out and build relationships, not just with our local customers, but with tourists as well. The North San Juan Community Center is an ideal location to host some of these events. As a longtime and upstanding community member, my legal farm and chosen industry deserve to be treated as any other legal business. I ask you to recommend the Board of Supervisors support cannabis events and to allow 8 events per property per year as in alignment with existing events policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Myers. I reside in Smartsville, and I do own a cannabis testing facility in Marysville, California. I commend Nevada County for trying to bring the better rules up to better accommodate where our regulations are now, where our cannabis industry is now. The problem that we have is a lack of education to the consumers. And that's what I'm here to talk about in the flea market approach. Is the flea market, we should consider, you guys should consider being able to allow the usage of on-site consumption and also food and beverages, non-alcoholic beverages. Because what the flea market is designed to draw is the consumers who are curious about the medical sides of cannabis, which is the fastest growing part of the industry. But the stigma in cannabis is still about smoke and the Cheech and Chong and everything. Those days are gone. Now with the consumption for therapeutics is the biggest and fastest growing in the marketplace. I believe that we're missing the opportunity because of the lack of education. Only way they get a formal education is through the flea market approach that brings all the people together, allows them to ask questions to the very specific growers, and be able to sample therapeutic products or medical grade products on site under the regulations of DCC and the requirements. And that'd be the fastest and best opportunity to bring consumers into the marketplace in Nevada County from the outside of the services. So I do ask you guys if you could actually think about that, consider it, look at on-site consumption, look at cafe models as it is in any other business, be able to treat cannabis no different than alcohol bars, restaurants, vineyards. You know, it's a big opportunity, and I think you guys should embrace it and commend the county of cannabis for looking ahead and trying to figure out better ways of bringing the marketplace up. I thank you guys very much and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, and Commissioner Mastronadato, excuse me. I will have 5 minutes because I'm going to answer some questions through this that came up. All right. Hi, everyone. Diana Gamzon, Executive Director of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. I'm here today representing over 180 local licensed cannabis businesses. We support the proposed amendments and its representation to economic development here in Nevada County. The proposed language represents a balanced approach to regulating and is based on public comment received. Amendments have included reducing the locations where cannabis events and dispensaries are allowed and shows the county's commitment to serving the needs of the entire community. I'm going to make some comments about some specific items within the ordinance. The first is exclusion zones. As a matter of principle, our organization opposes exclusion zones for cannabis farming. The intent of ag zoning from a general plan perspective is commercial activity and farming is the primary use. Our industry is farming in the same zoning to similar businesses that are allowed: commercial crop farms, orchards, vineyards, horse boarding, ranchers, commercial livestock. How is it logical to exclude one commercial activity over another that has a similar use? The only common sense pathway is for those that do not want to live in an area that allows cannabis to rezone to residential agriculture where cannabis is not allowed. The next item is about our organization is very supportive of utilizing M1 zoning for cannabis licensure. We have seen successful implementation of this policy in Nevada City, which has nearly a dozen businesses in similar zoning. However, the proposed language to allow these businesses in standalone structures is essentially, in standalone structures only, is essentially a ban, let's call it what it is, an estimate of less than about 5% of structures in M1 zoning would qualify as standalone, so this is just bad policy. And we recommend that the language be struck so that the discretion to rent to cannabis businesses can be left to the property owner, just as it is in Nevada City. The proposed language that all property taxes needs to be paid before any permit associated with a cannabis project is issued is simply unfair. All business owners in the county should be treated the same, period. We recommend that this language is struck from the ordinance. There was a question about how this came up, and so I just wanted to share my perspective. There was a neighbor-to-neighbor issue in a specific area, 6B Ranch. A cannabis applicant who ended up pulling their permit, so it's no longer, or pulling their application, so it's no longer a project. That property owner did not have their property taxes paid. This caused quite an uproar amongst many individuals within that neighborhood, and so there was a lot of public comment to Supervisor Hook requesting that property taxes be paid. But since that's where those comments came from, and since that permit has been pulled. Okay. We are excited about the prospect of having cannabis sales at events. These types of events may include seasonal farmers markets, so these are very common in regions like Humboldt and Mendocino. Educational trade shows and conferences like the ones in Sonoma County that Pat mentioned. And we recommend to include the parcel for the North San Juan Community Center and bringing that into the zoning. It really is ideal for hosting cannabis educational events. I also wanted to talk about a question that came up about cannabis events. And when we talk about the enforcement and the security, when cannabis licenses are issued by the Department of Cannabis Control, it is the premise that is being approved, and that premise must have a fence around it, some sort of a fence around it. And some other additional requirements are anything that is approved, the premise that is approved, is within that premise where enforcement for things like ensuring there's no consumption, as well as making sure that all cannabis is locked. That's all included within the DCC requirements and adherence to track and trace. My last point is we are very supportive of the language that requires local products to be sold at on-farm retail. To be clear, this policy already exists, as Brian mentioned, based on last year's approval from the supervisors. What is being presented is simply codifying this in the ordinance. And what's really important is that this is modeled after the existing local farm stand policy, which supports local agriculture. So it's modeled off.
Thank you, Diana. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, we do have one write-in comment that I can read into the record that we received.
Sure. Let's go.
This is a comment from Matthew Coulter. He says, quote, "I was the first person to be felony prosecuted after Prop 215 was enacted in 1996, and less legal is more because these draconians affect people their entire lives. Choose wisely because it affects people their entire lives," end quote.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so at this time, I will close the public hearing. And I just have to mention, Robert, there was a Cheech and Chong reference. I'm not so sure there's a lot of folks in this room that have been around that long. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that being said, and the public hearing being closed, I will now open it up to the commissioners if we have any further questions for staff. Diana has availed herself to us if we have any questions for her as well, and I think we can allow that. So that being said, Commissioner Garst, do you have anything?
Yeah, an issue was brought up about the single individual buildings being a requirement in the provision for expanding into industrial zones. I'm thinking about buildings like the new Mohawk space and the buildings around Elevation is located. Or would buildings like that be excluded by this language in this ordinance where a single property owner could rent to multiple tenants and have clustering of these businesses within multiple spaces?
So the language of the ordinance is intended that, yeah, it's a standalone building for cannabis-related activities. However, multiple cannabis-related businesses could be located in a building that had condo-type units. So you could have a testing laboratory, a cultivation site, or a manufacturer all in the same building. If But unless it's related to cannabis, then the way the ordinance is written, it would have to just be a standalone building. But multiple cannabis businesses could share a building.
So it would be either all cannabis or no cannabis.
Right.
Okay. And is that based on feedback from property owners? Like, where did that come from?
It was based on some feedback from Loma Rica property owners, the industrial area. Wasn't all of them by any means, but there were a couple of comments that was concerned mostly related to the odor and just the effect of other tenants. You know, I agree that there is control by the landlord. They could choose. However, based on some of those comments and discussion with the ad hoc committee, it was included in the ordinance for consideration.
And if there were, in these new buildings or spaces that would be used within the industrial zone, there would be regulations that apply to the building requirements, such as carbon filters and things like that?
Yeah, the ordinance does include odor filtration type system to be installed for any cannabis-related business to help ensure odors do not, seep outside.
Those are my questions.
Commissioner McAteer.
Yes, and Diana, if you don't mind coming on up, I'd like to chat with you too. Tell me about, Brian, about the North San Juan Community Center. I know North San Juan actually like the back of my hand, having schools up there and all. So why is it that, I mean, that's by far the best facility in that few blocks that would be available for indoor activities and outdoor activities?
This is the parcel right here, I believe, that's on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's based on its zoning. Its zoning is residential agriculture. And so those types of uses generally aren't consistent with the baseline of residential ag. And it's difficult in writing ordinances to identify specific sites that have unique characteristics for certain allowed uses. One potential solution would be a rezone of that property to a C1 type of a zone district to make it eligible. That would be an option because then it would fall in and meet the criteria as outlined in the ordinance. If it was the commission's direction to include that as a recommendation to the board, it's a fairly limited area. We started out, as I mentioned, with kind of 4 areas, a lot of parcels. We've narrowed it down to a fairly identified location. So it could probably be accommodated and built into the ordinance as specifically identified. I'd have to think a little bit exactly how to describe it. I guess one way you could potentially even just allow RA properties, which would bring this property and these properties into the equation for events. I don't know if these are feasible properties necessarily.
So, yeah, I know all those properties. I mean, let's be honest. There's very few properties in the North San Juan area that are, standing, safe. And even those ones across the street there and you've excluded because there's this church that's a couple blocks away. So, I mean, I tend to think that we want to make this accessible. We want to make it thrive, but I'm not so sure that the current lots are the best. And so I happen to be swaying towards the community center and maybe even some other properties there. I have a deep-seated problem with being that we're asking people to pay taxes before, and nobody else has that. And so that's sort of I don't know what in me, but I just want to make that clear. Diana, can you talk again about the youth? So yes, let's just use the North San Juan Community Center for an example. So there's an existing fence around it. And so if I'm 17, 18, 19, and I want to come to this, is there like, I know at the county fair, you get a little wristband that shows that, I can buy booze at the whatever, place. Is there something that you feel that would be a best practice in that?
Yes, it's pretty standard how it happens. I've been to many of these events in other jurisdictions. So the entire premise is blocked off, mainly with a gate or whatever, a fence. If there is consumption allowed, the DCC requires for that fence to be opaque. So they have the slots in the fence so you can't see through. The only in and out is that it's usually one or two entryways in, and there's security at either of those entryways. And these are requirements from the DCC to have age check verification at all the points of entry. So it would be, it'd be like going into a bar for a child to try to get into, or a youth to try to get into a bar. There's that point of contact at the entrance.
Okay.
And if it was inside, the premise would most likely, if it's the community center where it's, a smallish room, there also is that age verification at the door.
So a gentleman here was talking about food and drink and all. So can you, buy food and drink at these events?
Mm-hmm.
And who, is it your organization that looks to be putting these on? Who do you see putting these events on?
Well, now we get into fun of the DCC and how complicated things are sometimes. The individual or organization that is required to host a cannabis event must actually get a separate cannabis event organizer's license from the Department of Cannabis Control. That means that they are legally responsible for making sure all of the compliance requirements are in place at the event. They have to make sure that all of the track and trace requirements, all of the vendors that are participating meet all of the requirements. So they actually have to get their own license. Then once they have their own DCC event organizer's license, then that individual will go to the local jurisdiction to get approval and go to the state to get approval for a separate event license.
So again, who do you see doing this?
In other jurisdictions, there's event organizers that put these types of events on. There are or nonprofits that have put these on.
Well, do you see your organization doing that?
I think it's a conversation that we may have with our board of directors, but it might be a little bit more complicated because we have to.
So what I'm hearing is
possibly
XYZ does this in Sonoma County, Napa County, and they already have this permit, and so they're going to come to Nevada County and say, we do these flea market events, and so we're going to put this on here in Nevada County.
What we would hope is growth from within. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, Barbara, but someone like, Barbara Jones, who's here in the office. I have no idea if you're interested in this, but Barbara has an events company already. An individual like herself could apply to the state to get an event organizer's license to put on these events. So it's
Okay. Now, another person commented about 8 events per site instead of 8 events per area. Would you like to make a comment on that?
Absolutely. We support that. We always like to see consistent regulations without cannabis being singled out. So if it was 8 events per property, just as it is with the regular events ordinance, we would support that.
Okay. Brian, can you talk about, I know this is a crazy concept, but I kept thinking of we're out in ag, and cannabis is ag, and so a guy wants to come, he buys a property, and he wants to have a pig farm. And so his pig farm I don't know how many pigs you can put on a farm. I don't know what the requirements are on that. But as we know, pig farms are horrendous in smell. And so are there requirements afoot in the ag zoning that limit certain agricultural activities in the amount of space or pigs per acre?
Commissioner, there are certain like use permit requirements for certain even ag-related activities. Cannabis is not considered an ag product at this time, so it is kind of treated as more of a commercial type product that is regulated through a use permit. So some.
Just to clarify, I think for everyone, my recollection on the classification of cannabis is that it was the Ag Commission who forwarded that premise, and it has been adopted locally that cannabis is not an ag product.
It's in the code that it's not considered currently an ag product.
Right.
Right.
And which I think is important for everyone to understand why the distinction occurs. And perhaps that can be revisited at some point in the future, but right now that's the limitation that they're dealing with, yes.
Thank you very much. I had no knowledge of that, so that really helps understand that the county has already put that in some special category that's not with pigs and cows. Okay. Diana, I gather two things. This is sort of off the main topic, but I'm just sort of interested in the whole industry because I know that the industry's had troubles. The governor signed an emergency piece of legislation about hemp and its sale and all because it was making huge inroads and huge problems for your legal industry. Is that something that will have a positive impact upon your community?
What was approved with the emergency regulation was enforcement of THC products or restriction of THC hemp products that were available at gas stations and 7-Elevens, wherever, convenience stores. And we're very supportive of that. That helps protect our children. There was a previous version of this bill which we opposed. And we opposed that because it allowed for the integration of hemp into the state of California's cannabis supply chain, both from in-state hemp that was grown and from out-of-state hemp that was grown. And we opposed that because we felt that it would significantly diminish the offering of the cannabis industry with product that we grow by incorporating hemp from out of state. So it was a very big concern.
Okay, and secondly I gather there's been a step up of enforcement relative to illegal grows in the county. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective?
Yes.
Things are moving in the right direction relative to that?
Yes.
Great. Those are my questions for right now. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Duncan.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. I think the staff report was very well prepared and quite thorough in its review. My question first is related to the special events. I mean, we make a distinction about only offering local grown product, but would that also apply to only legally grown product? We've been looking at all these issues, like at least be current with your property tax or whatever in relation. But does this say then that the only products that can be showcased at an event must be from a legal operation licensed in the county?
Commissioner Duncan, yes, that's definitely the assumption and the intention of the ordinance. There are metrics and track and trace procedures that can verify that those products come from a legal source. I think those would not be checked every product every time, but if there was an indication that there was illegal product, then not only would our code or cannabis staff research that, but DCC would also be heavily involved, and there's serious consequences for illicit product being sold.
Right. For clarification, though, I think, so that it levels out the playing field, I think it's important for that to be, that specifically to be detailed, that, you know, only from legal operations, and maybe that's an inducement to those guys operating outside of the law to comply, you know, to want to participate as you go forward. I think that really does it. Terry made a great delve into many of my questions, so thank you.
Commissioner Millman.
Thank you. So, going back to the number of licenses in the county, so we currently have 2 operating dispensaries, and we're allowing for 2 additional ones. Are there more licenses out there? Do we know?
Commissioner Millman, I don't know that there's a finite number of licenses that can be issued from the state. Many jurisdictions limit the number of licenses that can be issued, and that's per jurisdiction. One thing that we haven't talked about is that we did receive a grant from the state to prepare this ordinance, because Nevada County was identified as an area that had not as much available access to retail cannabis than other areas or per capita. I'm not sure of the criteria. So there was a recognition that there could be more licenses for dispensaries issued in the county, and so we do have a grant to prepare this ordinance in order to, you know, potentially allow greater retail access to cannabis product.
So in terms of like the farm stands, is it de facto, if you have a farm that is legally growing, then you can also have a farm stand?
No, you would have to have a micro business and be permitted for retail sales to sell product at the site, whether outside in a farm stand type environment or within a structure. And again, we only have one of those currently in the county, and that's through the use permit, and that's called the micro business. These events would be different than those because they're not allowed on the cultivation site. They're allowed or potentially allowed in the commercial and industrial zones. And the reasoning for that is for the traffic, the noise, and not having these types of events out on farms, because we already do hear about noise and traffic issues from just cultivation activities. So the idea was to put them in more, commercially zoned areas that had infrastructure to support larger amounts of people.
So there's a letter that came in from the Elevation president or somebody involved in that business that said that there were currently 9 licenses and they were not supporting this because it was going to allow so many more. Do we know what he's referencing?
I don't know specifically. There may be 9 licenses for like non-storefront retail, including the storefront retail. That's kind of a delivery type of a system. I believe there's a person in the Eastern County that has a delivery type of business, and so he may be referencing those license types. But again, that's kind of why I brought up the grant that the Nevada County was identified by the state as being, not saturated with retail dispensary locations.
Right, and you feel that this has enough limits on it that it would not be saturated either in the way that some other areas are?
And I do, because that's kind of how we designed it. That's why we did not consider locations around the cities. There are commercial areas and things like that, or available zoning. in order to spread these out. And when we originally looked at it, we looked at Penn Valley, South County, and these two areas, and further narrowed it down, as I mentioned, based on comments. And so these were looked at as kind of rural areas that, could potentially support a business and not provide as much direct competition, but competition is not necessarily something we look at, but it does spread them out and tries to avoid that saturation in one specific area. And that's also why we're limiting it to one per area.
So then switching, we looked at the community center building up on the ridge. Is there an obvious building that would be used for this in Soda Springs?
And my understanding is there's a lot of retail space that's available in that site. I go up there an awful lot also. So on that south side there's a lot of open retail available.
I think the old Soda Springs store is available. They moved across the street and built a new building, and I was just up there last week. And I believe there's space within this structure here, which is the old store, and there might be some space kind of down toward the blinking light in a couple of those buildings as well. Are you planning for the ski museum? Yes.
So back to the property tax. This is the only place where we are requiring that your property taxes be paid before you apply for something else in the county?
As it relates to land use permits, I don't know another department or if there's a social services, something that requires property taxes, but from a zoning ordinance and land use perspective, yes, this would be the only license or a permit type that would have that requirement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a problem with that one. Okay, so going to the number of events, is this designed to be 8 events total in the entire county per year, or per site, or per city?
The way it's written is 8 events per area, so 8 events in Soda Springs and 8 events in North San Juan per year. The outdoor event ordinance that has been referenced does allow 8 events per site. The reason was that this is a very focused area, and so just moving it one parcel over and potentially having 200 events might be an overtaxing of the area. And so while 8 events per parcel is allowed on remote residential ag properties for private events, those typically are spread out, and you're not going to have the same event right next door on a multiple day basis. So that was the thinking, to line up the number, and essentially it's on one area. It's basically one location, even because of the limited options. So that was the thinking behind it.
That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Brian, when we talk often about the one outstanding use permit, and I assume, just for clarification, we're talking about the DENCOB operation.
Correct.
And under that use permit that was approved up here, can they do 8 events a year as well?
They actually had an event recently. It was not an event where cannabis product was sold. It's kind of a gray area because obviously they have a storefront. So the event itself did not sell cannabis product, but they do sell it on the site. The way the ordinance is proposed is that type of event is not allowed in that zoning district. So they would not be able to have an event that sold product, but they already have a storefront to sell their product. So in a way, they can have an event, and it's more of an informational and benefits and medicinal uses and gather information, whereas these events would allow product to actually be sold, not from a storefront retail. So very similar, but also different.
I kind of understand that. And then, just to be clear, there are opportunities for other folks to apply for this type of use permit throughout the county?
Yes, correct. That's available to anyone that has the proper zoning and can meet the requirements. Some of the hindrances are dead-end road standards. That comes up a lot because we do require secondary access. So some of the farms are out pretty far and can't meet that criteria. But there's no limit currently on the number of licenses for retail sales at cultivation sites.
Yeah, and because I often refer to them as being a model of what's available out there for folks. Okay, that being said, I did two things that just, the exclusion zones and the tax issue just kind of, I don't know, kind of make me think. I mean, I think we're on the right path here. The state and the county has gone forward with this. It's been years now, since 2019, so we're going on 5 years, and, you know, the horses left the barn. You know, trying to close the gate on these folks seems a little restrictive to me. That's all I have. Anyone has anything else?
So I'm suggesting some kind of, let's see if we can have a compromise here, okay? So I'd like to suggest going down through the 1 through 6. I think I'm just fine with number 1, allowing 2 retail dispensaries. I'm not okay with the manufacturing restriction. I think it should be all M1, allowing for the property owner to make the decision of who they want to rent to. While I understand your concerns about the exclusion zones, I also realize that the $5,000 is going to be a great limiting factor, and I also think the supervisors who live in some of these rural communities and support these rural communities are being pushed on that, so I'm allowing for that to exist. I think the allowing the 8 events a year in those 2 areas and adding the North San Juan Community Center and asking the staff to come back with recommendations to the Board of Supervisors of how to add that up in North San Juan. And I think we should nix the property tax requirement. So that's sort of where I stand currently, and let the rest of the commission banter over that.
So I would differ with you on a couple of those. I don't think the exclusion zone is necessary, and I think it's a strange thing to do. I'm not very articulate all of a sudden, but I don't like that one. So, so then the other on the industrial, I don't have as much of a problem of requiring it to be a freestanding building. I don't feel as strongly about that one as I do about 3.
I agree with most of your positions. I also do not like the exclusion zone. Like Mike said, I think it is a huge step backwards from where we are, and it just kind of feels discriminatory and exclusionary to me. So that doesn't sit well with me. Beyond that, I agree with all of your other positions.
Sorry, the other 2 things I would add into the mix is some sort of a rezone or something for the San Juan Community Center to be included in some way, and language that it's not only Nevada County grown, but Nevada County legal for the product that's being sold.
Yeah, I think I'm right with you on those.
Would that be the correct route, would be to recommend a rezone of that parcel? And can a parcel have, I think parcels can be multiple zoning districts simultaneously, is that correct?
They can be split zoned,
Split zone.
but not necessarily two zoning at once. You could have the front half be one
Okay.
zoning and the back half be a different zoning.
Okay.
As far as the exclusion zones, it seems really well, I wouldn't say discriminatory, but I mean, it's a property owner's choice. And I think there's an attempt here to work with some of the ones in the community who have a problem with cannabis production. And, but I think it's an onerous burden for them, to come up with the money and to go through the process of doing so. So to me, it seems like it's sort of self-canceling. I mean, it's not a giveaway that, automatically they're going to be able to do it and they can go out and sign all their neighbors up. I mean, this is a lengthy, costly process. And, but I think that maybe they do deserve an opportunity to voice their objections.
But don't they have that already in terms of the control that they have over what happens on their own property? I mean, nothing about an exclusion zone allows them to force somebody else to exclude it on their property, on their neighbor's property. It seems like a strange carve-out to allow somebody to make a stand when they already have that legal ability to do that on their own property.
Right. Based on the comments that were received during the public comment period, the letters that we've reviewed, it looks like there were a number of HOAs that were concerned about what was going on within their developments. And that there were not one person, but maybe more than one. And this is an opportunity for people to band together to feel like, well, I'll protect you, you protect me type of thinking. But, I mean, they have to be willing. They don't have to do it. And they have to pay for that ability, that right to do it. So I guess, I just don't see this as being that detrimental to what we're trying to accomplish today in terms of getting the ordinance refined. I mean, when it was originally adopted, I think it was a recognition that it wasn't perfect. And as time went on, we would understand better what we're looking at here in Nevada County. And I think we're getting there. Is this perfect yet? Probably not. But I think we're headed in the right direction. So for me, exclusion doesn't pose a major obstacle at this point.
Can we look again at that particular piece of it? If somebody new buys the property, under what mechanism does the exclusion drop off of that particular property?
It would be through a rezone process. So an application to rezone their property, essentially, to remove the CE zone, or the CE suffix, basically.
This is what I don't like about it, is that it's not just a property owner taking a stand of their property. It's then them excluding future owners from participating in an allowed use in that zoning district. I don't really like that layer of control over.
I think, on the other hand, it allows a supervisor to be able to turn to the person who's complaining, like a barking dog, and give them some sense of an out. And then the person looks at it and says, God, it's $5,000. Oh, forget it. I just think that it allows the elected representatives who get complaints about cannabis being grown in their area or whatever else, the opportunity to say, well, here's an avenue for you. And so I don't think it's the greatest thing going either, but I do think that, like Laura says, it's not that big a deal. I mean, some of the other changes that are being proposed are bigger deals than this item.
I mean, in all fairness, 10 properties getting together, it's $500 a piece. So that feels like pretty low barrier to entry, or like a little low
5 years,
cost.
they get it for 5 years, and then they got to come up with another $5,000.
But that's not the case. That's not. It's not that it's zoned for 5 years. It's that if somebody wanted to remove the exclusion zone, they would apply for a rezoning, and then it would take 5 years for that to come off of the property. But it would be the burden of the next owner to remove that. They would have to pay to have it removed, and it would take 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not good just for 5 years. It runs with the land in perpetuity until it's changed by a future property owner, a current property owner, whoever, so.
Okay, so there is a mechanism to correct the course of the land going into the future. I guess I don't see this really that differently from instances where we approve projects that part of the conditions, gets imposed is that they can't keep livestock on land that normally, if it wasn't part of this development project, they should be able to. But, so we do have restrictions like that that apply. And then I guess I also fall back on the fact that buyers have their eyes wide open when they go in. They don't have to buy that particular piece of property, or they can understand what the limitations are, similar to when they're going into a development, an HOA. So for me, I guess the exclusion doesn't seem to be a major stumbling block right now to taking some action today and getting this in front of the Board of Supervisors.
I'm still struggling with the exclusion. It's not like, we're talking about such a specific thing. It's not like you can go to the county and say, I would like to exclude that my property have, a kennel because barking dogs bother me and all my neighbors agree with me. And then not only is it not going to happen now, but after I sell my property, then potentially it's still not going to happen for another 5 years. I just think that's a really, I don't know that I would, if we can't come to an agreement, then I don't know that I would not, I think the rest of this is doing really good things, but this feels like kind of a large poison pill to me.
Brian, who are the two supervisors that serve on the at this advisory group?
Supervisor Swarthout and Supervisor Schofield.
Okay. So I just bring this again as a political thing, that we have two supervisors who have already reviewed this and thought this was a fairly good idea. And so I'm sort of leaning again still that, let the elected officials who have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis with their constituents, this is up to them. And let's see, I suspect we will get hardly any applications in the near future. And that's...
With all due respect, I don't think that we should be playing politics with policy.
Sorry, I'm just a realist.
Yeah, but I don't think that doesn't feel like a good reason. Politics doesn't feel like a good reason to put a policy into place. I also think it feels a little hostile to property owners who have gone through the legal process, spent a lot of money, and taken a lot of time to come into compliance, which is something that we're trying to do. That has been the task of this ordinance. And then for their neighbors to kind of team up against them. It just feels a little bit hostile in that way, talking about there being potential for like donuts or checkerboards.
So Joe, what if we agree to disagree and move on all the other items except the exclusion zone and let the Board of Supervisors make that decision?
I think that's a great idea.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I too, because I can't support a recommendation with the exclusion zones in it. To me, for two reasons, or three. One, I think it sets precedent for, I don't know, what's next. Like you said, the dog kennels. And two, I think it's a zoning issue. And the zoning is in place. So that being said, if we can or choose to kick the can back to the supervisors, I'm okay with that as my last official act.
So, Commission, I will note and carry that forward on that specific issue, that there was a bit of discussion and there wasn't a complete consensus, and that essentially 3 were against and 2 were generally for, or at least for letting the board make the final call.
I think that's a fair analogy of that.
Okay, so then can we hammer out, are we okay on number 1? Are we all okay on item number 1 there, the 2 retail dispensaries? Okay, and what about, let's move to number 6, removing the property tax issue. And what about Nevada County cannabis sold to be Nevada County grown? We're fine with number 5. Grown and legal, thank you. And then number 4 is adding the temporary events in 8 in each location, and adding the North San Juan Community Center, however the county staff wants to write that in.
Yes.
Are we okay with that? So then our only other item is number 2, which is about distribution in M1 areas. And I had proposed that allowing the property owner to make a decision as to who he leases to.
So you're going to make a proposal?
Okay, so anybody that wants to jump in and help with this motion that needs to be made. And Commissioner McAteer, are you stepping up to make this motion?
Yes, I am. But I guess I'm talking myself through this, Brian, which is to approve number 1 and approve number 2 with the caveat that the commission could not come to a complete consensus on the item of the exclusion zone. Is that a fair way to go about this?
Yeah, I think that works. I think there's a few more items in there. I think with the industrial zoning that you would recommend removing the standalone building requirement. Yes. Okay. And then including the community center for temporary cannabis events in North San Juan, add legal product only in addition to Nevada County grown, and removing the property tax requirements.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. The tax issue. The standalone building, I guess you just kind of gravitate towards that being owned by the business, but it can be leased as well. So I guess my question really doesn't make any sense, because I was thinking about leasing a storefront in a strip mall. Who are we worried about the taxes with, the leasee or the leaseor?
I think they're 2 separate issues. The standalone building just applies to, or the way it's worded would just require that cannabis only occupy 1 building. It really doesn't have much to do with the taxes, other than property taxes are required to be current. And it's probably more applicable to like the cultivation sites than the industrial sites, although it could apply to industrial sites.
Okay. I guess I'll accept that as clearing it up.
I want to double back to the industrial zone. The way that it stands, as you brought it to us, it needs to be a standalone building. But you're proposing...
I'm proposing so allow the landlord to make a decision as to who he or she wants to lease to.
So in this case, it would be striking the proposed section J1B from the draft ordinance. Is that correct?
So I think my view is sort of look for you, Brian, to tell me what to say.
Yeah. Do we change that or just strike it?
Can we just strike it?
Yeah, I think it would just be stricken to get the point across.
So I did write down each of these sections, I believe. Where the property tax is the one that I didn't get down. If you want me to try to stumble through this. Where is the property tax?
It's G 121 or XXI.
21XXI.
Yeah, it's on page 22 of attachment 1.
So I think I have all of the other sections written down here. I wonder if the recommendation to rezone the North San Juan Community Center would be like a third recommendation?
Well, I think the direction I heard was to include that property in some shape or form, either through a rezone or modifying the ordinance to bring it into the fold.
Uh-huh. But would that be, say, a third recommendation in addition to the two already stated here?
Yeah, I think I think it seems like almost all of those 6 items have some tweak to them.
Yeah.
So I think that would just be part of the motion.
Okay.
And I can repeat those things and someone can say, so moved.
What we would do is make a motion for both of these recommendations simultaneously. Is that correct?
Yeah, with all
Okay.
those proposed changes.
Okay.
So Brian, it's over to you.
Okay.
And then I'll say.
Yeah, that was a good idea, Brian.
Open my big mouth. So I believe the direction that was given was to, no changes to number 1, to allow a maximum of 2 retail dispensaries through the competitive selection process, to make a change to proposal number 2, to strike the requirement for a standalone structure in the M1 zoning to accommodate those different license types, that there was extensive discussion regarding the exclusion zone and not a complete consensus, with 3 commissioners recommending the removal of the exclusion zone, 2 commissioners generally supportive of the exclusion zone, with the consensus being the Board of Supervisors makes the final decision. Number 4, allow temporary cannabis events and include the community center as an available location, either through rezoning or another method to make it allowable. Require all cannabis to be sold in Nevada County to be Nevada County grown only, and add additional language that it must be legal and come from a legal source, and strike require all property taxes to be paid.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And are we voting on 6 items or 1?
So that would be the first, basically one item, that is the recommended of adoption of the ordinance with those changes, and then there's a second recommendation for the resolution for the competitive selection, so you'll be making 2.
Do you want to put that on our screen, the second one?
We can do that.
So the motion and second
It's to item 1.
is to item 1 with pertaining to the ordinance with the changes as stated. So if the clerk will call the vote, please.
Certainly. How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Millman?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Mastradato?
Yes,
Thank you.
Motion carries.
the motion carries.
And then I'll recommend that to the Board of Supervisors to adopt the resolution to approve the competitive application selection process for up to 2 retail storefront commercial cannabis dispensaries and the establishment of the Retail Commercial Cannabis Application Evaluation Committee.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second on item number 2. Jodina, if you'll call the vote, please.
Yes, thank you. How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Millman?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Mastradato?
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion carries.
And lastly, through the chair, I would advise that you make a recommendation on your environmental determination that the project is exempt, categorically exempt from CEQA.
That is included in the ordinance. language and will be, but for the record, that is the recommendation.
So we'll need a separate motion on the environmental.
I would advise it, yes, so make a separate motion.
So could you put that in wording, please?
Sure. I would recommend that the commission make a motion to determine that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to sections 15162, 15061B3, and 15308 of the California Environmental
Okay, well, I recommend that.
And I'll second it.
So moved. So we have a, so we have a motion and a second. Jodina, if you'll call the vote, please.
Yes, thank you. How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Millman?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Mastradato?
Yes, the motion carries. Okay, folks, onto the board. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
How many more times do we get Matt to come down here?
As
Find a
many
way.
as the commission would like.
That's great.
Okay, moving on to the commission business, upcoming.
Chair,
Planning
I
Commission.
would recommend, I don't know if you already did, but I would close the public hearing formally.
Oh, I thought I did
You may
that.
have already done so, but.
I'm sorry. So we will close the public hearing. Moving on to the
Special time.
special time. Yeah, so what's going on for you good folks?
Well, I was happy to hear the,
Squash.
about the holiday gas station. I mean, I think I bother staff every meeting just about develop, the progress on South County projects. So, thank you.
That's after you got off a quick quack.
Yeah. Yeah, they're everywhere now.
Commissioners, we do have a scheduled meeting in 2 weeks on the 24th. We are, I think there might be a consent item as well, but the main item is the Tiny Homes on Wheels ordinance. So that will be heard in 2 weeks. Beyond that, we don't have a set meeting in November that has been scheduled. One could come up, but if I know more on the 24th, I'll report that, but currently we don't have anything beyond the 24th scheduled. I did also want to mention that the board did uphold the approval, your planning commission's approval of the Alpenglow Sawmill project on Tuesday.
That was appealed.
That was appealed. It was heard a couple days ago up in Truckee, and the board did deny the appeal and uphold the approval.
Was it unanimous?
It was unanimous.
Good.
It's 5-0. So, want to report that. And then, I don't want to step on commission business, but I do want to recognize Chair Master Donato as his last meeting and just thank him for his service. I do have a small little token to remember us by the squash. And just wanted to.
Smaller than a squash or larger?
Well, that's awful nice. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Come on, Brian,
Okay.
get up there and hand him the plaque.
Oh, really? Make sure I'm gone, right?
How many years? And Mike, what do you do, this all came about so suddenly.
Okay.
Could we get a little story?
Yeah, I don't mind telling a little story.
We can adjourn the meeting and then tell stories.
Yeah, does anyone have anything else? So this can
The
be,
only thing I have is, the minutes are verbatim.
yeah. Is that Jodina? I noticed that as well.
I wish I could take full credit for it, but I have been using transcription captions and have just been going back and cleaning them up in detail.
Shorter. I mean, I just want to save your ears and fingers.
I appreciate that.
More minutes than I've ever seen.
No, I like that. I think it's, you go back and you say, I can't believe I said that.
I've been instructed that the minutes should be as close to verbatim as possible for legality reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe all the legal focus on us gets them.
Okay, so that being said, a motion to adjourn.